Welcome back to the Ryles Report. On the last episode, we had author of the book, America Made Me a Black Man, Somalian immigrant Boyah J. Farah, and one of the experiences that he says helped make him a black man was a quintessential black experience, an encounter with the police where he was wrongly accused of a bank robbery. And we're going to take a deeper dive into how Boyah's encounter with the police is a part of a larger system of oppression in this country that is called the criminal justice system. But before we do that, I want to thank all of the new subscribers, both here in the United States and abroad, for tuning in to the Ryles Report because we're trying to level up the conversation. Now, let's move forward.
Welcome to the Ryles Report, where we add historical context to life, love, and politics. The Ryles Report is now in session.
Today, we're going to talk about systems of oppression. The criminal justice system is one such system that, as we looked at the discussion with Boyah, he encountered dealing with the police and didn't have a full grasp that could have been a life or death situation. And so we're going to talk about how we got here and why we got here. And so systems of oppression, the justice system, and why history is important. You see, we don't study history for the sake of studying history. We study history to understand the past and to predict the future. Just after slavery, we had two systems, Jim Crow and the Black Codes. Most people don't know the difference. Well, the Black Codes were enacted soon after emancipation, and they were enacted in order to get the formerly enslaved back on the plantation. So laws were passed that created lengthy prison sentences for menial crimes. The Jim Crow system was a code of conduct to keep you in your place. So you couldn't look a white person in the eye, or you couldn't walk on the same street. So the difference between the two is Black codes were laws meant to send you back to prison. Being caught in town without $50 in your pocket, being caught unemployed, you were a vagrant or a vagabond as they would call you. And Jim Crow was a system to make sure that you stayed in your place. So the Black codes were a system of laws enacted in order to increase the prison population as a guise or scheme to get free labor as they had during slavery. In fact, in Mississippi, prior to the enactment of many of these Black codes or Black code laws, the prison population for Blacks was zero, because during slavery, no one allowed their slaves to go to jail. They would handle any discipline on the plantation. After slavery, and during Reconstruction, Black codes were passed and laws were passed that made it illegal to do some of the most menial things. And one of the laws is called the Pig Law. The Pig Law made it illegal to get caught stealing any farm animal, a chicken, a pig, a cow, a horse, and you could get anywhere from 5 years on up for doing any one of those acts. And what makes it so interesting and applicable today is we can make an analogy between the Pig Law of 1870 and the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, which made the penalties for being in possession of crack cocaine more severe than the penalties for being in possession of powdered cocaine. In fact, when the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986 was passed, they saw an exponential increase in the number of incarceration rates of Black women. 828% increase in the incarceration of Black women occurred after the passage of the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. The same way there was an exponential increase in the number of imprisoned Black men during the Black Code era. Now, what happened after the Black Codes were passed? Well, there came another system, and it was called convict leasing. Convict leasing was a system contrived in order to rebuild the South with free labor. So, if you violated one of the Black Codes and got caught with a chicken, or got caught after dark with no money in your pocket, you could then be sentenced to 5 years hard labor. And then you could be rented out to the very plantation you and your family may have once worked. This was a system in order to rebuild the South for free. It is no different than the prison industrial complex system that we have today, where private prisons are making products for sale and the labor is coming from Black bodies, the vast majority of which per capita are Black men and women. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act that I spoke of 1986 actually criminalized addiction. And if you juxtapose or you compare that to our recent issues with fentanyl and heroin, the reaction to those addictions, which are primarily addictions by white people, has been completely different. The response has not been incarceration, but instead treatment and mental health care. What is important to understand with convict leasing is that that system was in place long enough for people to become millionaires and for states like Mississippi, Florida, and Louisiana to regain their. After the Civil War, Mississippi was bankrupt. But for convict leasing, the state would have stayed in a state of bankruptcy and a literal pauper state in this country. But because of free Black labor, the same way it had been during slavery, Mississippi, Florida, Louisiana, all were able to get back on their feet and then become contributing members of this country, what we call the United States. Now, what's important for me as a lawyer here in Florida is that Florida was the last state to stop convict leasing. And when we look at the vestiges of Jim Crow and the Black Codes, we have to understand that they may not say that these laws are specifically to attack Black people, but the net effect is to affect Black people. For instance, we go back to that 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act. We know for a fact that there were more poor Black and brown people using crack cocaine than were using powdered cocaine. Yet the sentences and the penalties were much harsher. As it relates to powdered and crack, you had to be caught with 100 times more powdered cocaine to get the sentence of someone caught with crack cocaine. So it was 100 to 1. You can Google it. A person had to get caught with 100 times more powdered cocaine than a person that is caught with crack cocaine to get the same sentence. And that's why we saw an exponential increase in the prison population of Black women primarily. 828% increase in the prison population after the 1986 Anti-Drug Abuse Act was passed, and 429% for Black men after the 1986 Drug Abuse Act was passed. So, the criminal justice system has been utilized in this country since its inception to game the system for the benefit of those who are in power. Using free labor by guise of law and order is all a part of the justice system. It remains today, and unfortunately, we get hung up on political parties. We get hung up on Republican and Democrat, but Republicans and Democrats passed that 1986 Drug Abuse Act. Republicans and Democrats passed the 1990 Omnibus Crime Bill, which gave mandatory minimum sentences for things like marijuana possession. So you have people doing life terms as a result of being caught with marijuana. This system is a part and baked into American judicial systems. And if we as citizens aren't vigilant about the people we elect, aren't vigilant about what's in the laws they pass, these type of laws are going to continue to occur. I want you to remember this. In this country, you can make a law out of anything you want, even if it's bad. Remember, slavery was legal. Teaching a slave to read and write was illegal. Think about that. Killing a slave was legal. Helping a slave escape slavery was illegal. That's the irony of the American judicial system. And when it's all said and done, it's all about the cream. Cash rules everything around me. If you understand this, you truly understand the American judicial system. Thank you for tuning in to the Ryles Report.